here we are. We have seen The Square. Can you say in a few words what this movie is about?
There's an affair between two married people, married to different people, and somehow they get it in their head that the solution to being able to sustain the relationship is to somehow get away and take this big bag of money with them. One thing I think this film has, and it's not entirely film noir, it has some elements of film noir. Namely, I think the doomed protagonist and the kind of underbelly of some little community. But one thing I really liked was the realism to this film. I mean, the characters I thought were well rounded. They're not, and in a non-Coen Brothers like way, these are kind of everyday people. There's no super absurd or quirky characters in the film, and in that sense. It got me thinking about, well, who in this film do I like?
Right from the get-go, the characters are not necessarily likable, and you may not, and I think most people will not, put themselves in the shoes of the protagonist. So as to a certain degree, that again goes back to this train wreck issue. To a certain degree, here you are seeing things unfold, but may not necessarily feel personal angle coming to them, which I think I felt in A Simple Plan a lot more.
There's one thing that we noticed about the bag of money, and we of course don't want to give too much away, but it kind of just comes into existence in the film. It just appears in the film, and we don't know exactly where it came from. And then in a similar way, almost in a kind of cyclical way, the film ends with someone who has blood on his hands walking away with the money. But but that person's future is certainly a little bit unsure. And so, do you think there's something larger we should read there in terms of like any kind of morals or symbolism?
Well, again, to the larger degree would be the curse that money brings. Because wherever the bag is, and we're not trying to give anything away for the film because you don't know who walked away with the bag, but wherever the bag is, it is making things more and more complicated in there. So again, I mean, I think this is the old trope of money equals trouble.
Whether the money is either physically close by to somebody, like somebody actually has their hands on the bag of money, or it's the idea of getting it, people's their moral compass gets skewed as they try to devise ways to get their hands on that money and get away, scot-free. And that's one thing I did like about this film. There perhaps is a moral to this story, but it does not hit you over the head.
And there are a lot of people that get hit over the head in this film. So in that sense, I think that's a good thing. They could have hit us with the morals over the head. I think it is about, as you said, also about the sort of like the underbelly of that society.
And I didn't really see the film. I only saw bits of it. I came in very late, but I think I saw enough of it. But one thing that you had mentioned was that it doesn't seem as though the man is trying to push that the idea of the two of them getting away comes from her. And I think if the writers had a goal there, I think it's a very smart one, because I think very often it is the older man he doesn't want to change his life, he just still wants to be able to sleep with the younger woman. Whereas the younger woman is perhaps a little bit more compelled to change partners.
But I would look at it in a slightly different way, and that is also because there is also an economic difference between the two couples. Even though they are living in the same neighborhood, but they look from the feel of the house.
They live across the canal from one another.
But their houses are different.
And
so it's the guy who appears to be more well off. It's the guy who appears to be more in control of his life compared to the younger woman.
Well, and there's a really good comparison between the two husbands. One runs a construction company. The other is a tow truck driver. So they're both coming up through the ranks of manual laborers, but one has been a little bit more fortunate, a little bit more entrepreneurial. Who knows? It's really left unsaid. And so I like that comparison there. It's not that he's a banker. He is also a man who works with his hands.
But I think that also goes back to this issue that he is still satisfied with living with his wife, even though it is very clear that it's a loveless marriage, but it's very clear. But he is okay with keeping that status quo. But it is her, his mistress, who wants to change it. And how to change it? Well, with money.
Yeah, yeah, and that's great because at one point when he's not willing to go ahead with the plan, then she shuts him down and says, "Well, then don't call me," implying, "Look, I don't want to see you again. We're not going to sleep together again." And I thought that was a really good moment. I think it very explicitly gets that point across that she wants a new life. He just wants to add some spice to his life.
So, Kevin, who should see this film?
I think the film will appeal to any kind of film goer who is up for a slightly challenging cinema going experience. There's some brutal moments, there's some scary moments, there's some harrowing moments, and as Salman has said, it is a bit like watching a train wreck in slow motion, so that's not for everybody. But I think people who enjoy seeing good drama, good mystery, and people who enjoy films where they might know where the film is going to go, but perhaps not exactly how it's going to get there, I think people will definitely still find the film satisfying.
I will add to it. Actually, I enjoyed the film, and I would also add that it's also nice to see a movie about Australian society. I mean, we see a lot of these films, for example, in the US, but I think it was good to see the underbelly of an Australian neighborhood rather than, for example, outside of Boston or somewhere else. So I think in that sense, I think it was a neat.
There's no shrimp on the Barbie in this film.
That's correct.